The Detroit primary election is just days away, and here to talk more about it is Detroit City Clerk Janice Winfrey. I'm digital anchor Andre Ash. Madam Clerk, thanks so much for joining us here in
Thanks
Studio
for having
1452.
me. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we're just days before another election day, and it seems as if, I mean, for anyone who has followed Detroit elections or politics, this particular year has been very quiet, it seems, around the mayoral conversations, if you will. But one of the sticky issues on the ballot that Detroiters and that voters will see, perhaps, is Proposal P. That got on the ballot sort of at the last dodging minute. But what can voters expect to see when they look at that ballot on Election Day?
So it's a short ballot.
Yeah.
It's still an important ballot, but it's a short ballot. So you'll have the mayor's race, the clerk's race, some of the council districts, not all of them, because you need twice as many candidates than to be elected in order to make the primary. For instance, if you're voting for not more than one, then you need at least three in order to have a primary. So, and then police commissioners, and not all districts there as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned city council, because one of the districts that is very hot with multiple candidates is District 4. Not to really call out any district in particular, but that's just an example of when voters vote for the city council by districts. It is the top two vote getters that move to the general election, correct?
That is correct.
All right.
That is correct. So if you only have two candidates, for instance, let's say an incumbent and then a challenger, well, they're not going to make the primary because you already have your two.
Right.
So they will just have a general election.
They'll just have a general election. But there's also no primary for perhaps city council members who are not facing a challenger.
That is correct.
Then there's that incumbent is pretty lucky.
Yeah, I think so.
Right. You mentioned city clerk. You have been the city clerk in Detroit for about 16 years.
That's correct.
And we know that this is another election cycle. But just talk about your experience so far being the city clerk. A lot has come your way. We've seen elections that have been quite challenging, both on a local, state, and federal level. This past election, 2020, was quite interesting. And you will be going to Congress this very week to talk about the challenges that you see that voters face.
Yeah, well, I'll be talking about the challenges that election administrators face.
Yes, that
and the
too.
threats.
Yes.
And the harassment that we received as a result of the 2020 election. And actually, I'll be defending American democracy. And really, that's the real work, you know. That's the real work for a clerk or an election administrator, to hold up democracy, to ensure that every citizen, every elector has the right to cast their vote in a free and fair election without being intimidated or harassed. My goal is to ask Congress to consider making those federal offenses. People should not be harassed and threatened and their lives threatened simply for doing their jobs.
Yeah, and I know the 2020 election was a very trying one for many election offices all across the state and across the country. And now we have proposed legislation in some states where Republicans are arguing for election integrity, but this particular state has argued that there was very much integrity in the process to begin with.
Absolutely.
So you'll be making that argument before Congress
Absolutely.
this week.
And speaking about the 140 plus lawsuits that former President Trump filed against me in my office claiming voter fraud. Every last one of them were dismissed and deemed frivolous and deceptive. So, I'll be sharing that information with members of Congress.
I know there's some steps that the city clerk's office, your office, Department of Elections has taken to make the process for voting much more efficient, right? And a lot of cities have done the same, instituting voter mailboxes,
Yes,
drop boxes.
drop boxes, yes.
I thought that was very interesting, and they're here to stay.
And
are
they're
they?
here to stay, yeah. So, I implemented the Dropbox in 2018, actually. I only had two at that time, one in front of the Department of Elections and one in front of downtown, KMAC building. I just wanted to see if people would truly be interested in such. Just trying to expand the franchise, making voting more accessible, making it easy. Well, I'm so glad that we decided to do that because as we move further into 2020, those drop boxes really became a lifeline for us.
Especially during a pandemic.
Absolutely, during the pandemic, during an election year where the United States Post Office General Postmaster said that they could not guarantee delivery of our ballots on election day or by election day. That's awful. So we, at that time, we installed some 30 drop boxes in neighborhoods and in front of all of our satellites so that our voters could easily access the ballot box and drop off their ballot and feel safe about it.
But talking about making the process for voting more efficient, but also much more easier, some critics would say, well, making it too easy, you open up the door also for potential fraud, particularly in the mail system, when more people are voting perhaps without voter ID, when ballots that are unrequested being mailed to people's homes who no longer live there. So is there some credibility or some type of balance, in your opinion, that must be struck in making voting accessible, but also making sure that there's integrity, that every vote is secure while you're making it more easy and accessible for people to vote? Yeah,
so ballots have never been sent out to homes where they weren't requested under this administration. That was alleged under the administration prior to me. But then election law was changed in 2006. And in fact, it was Judge Mayor Beth Kelly at that time. And she determined that in order for an individual to receive a ballot, they must request one. So you must fill out an application to vote in order to receive a ballot. That stops that sending ballots out to empty homes or whatever. Right. Additionally, voting by mail or absentee voting is very safe. When we receive those ballots, we must check the signature to the signature that's in the qualified voter file, which is the same signature that's on your driver's license.
Right.
If that signature doesn't match, we cannot process that ballot. We reach out to the voter and tell them one or two things. Your signature doesn't match, and you need to come in and sign personally. Or if you have a new signature that you want to, because sometimes people have medical conditions, strokes and the like, and their signature changes. Or just as they age, the signature may change over time.
Right.
If we notice a difference that doesn't meet the requirement as looking like what's on file, then we'll ask you to come in and re-sign so that we can have a new signature for you on file. So those signatures that come in on those ballot envelopes for absentee voting must be matched with the signature on file.
Now, I'm talking as a journalist, but I'm also speaking as a millennial. Is there any other type of way to bring it more 21st century style is how we verify people's vote other than signatures?
You know, we have to
move towards something like that.
We
whatever
could.
That is.
We could, and that's why your legislators, when you vote and you choose your state legislators and you choose your state reps and state senators, it's important that you choose people who have those kinds of ideas and things that they would like to see happen. We can't do that at the Department of Elections because I'm not a legislator. I don't create law. I only follow the law, and follow the law to the letter I do.
That's very interesting you bring that point up because, you know, there's a lot of debate centering around, you know, who has the authoritative decision making when it comes to any changes in election law, and certainly per constitution that and how states run their elections, it's left up to state legislators. And what do you see voting, the election process moving forward, looking ahead, and how you engage more people to be a part of the democratic process?
by expanding the franchise, by keeping it accessible, by keeping it fair. One thing that 2020 did do is that it showed the residents of the state of Michigan that our elections were administered flawlessly. And the reason why they were able to do that is because every canister, every ballot container that had voted ballots, was able to be looked at and compared with the application to ensure that the process was fair compared to the vote totals tapes, to show that integrity was in place. That doesn't happen every time. It should be able to happen every time, but because of election laws and our archaic election laws in the state of Michigan, there are restrictions as to which canisters or ballot containers, voted ballot containers, can be opened and reviewed and which ones cannot be. My choice would be that everyone, upon request, every canister should be able to be looked at and reviewed after the process.
So, as we look towards the primary election, voter turnout, what do you expect? What do you predict?
Unfortunately, based on the numbers that we see coming in now, it's going to be very low. It's going to be very low, but that's typical in a primary municipal. It's unfortunate. People seem to think that, we come out, we want to vote for the president. Yeah. You should feel like that for every election. The activity, the participation should be just as hearty for your municipal race, your state race, and your school board races. It should be the same way, but it's not. It's not. But it's not because we do anything less, because we don't. We still install our drop boxes. We still open up our satellite voting. We still mail our Election Connection newsletter or sample ballot to every registered household in the city of Detroit, to remind people, to encourage people. We do billboards. We do television commercials, radio commercials, and things like that.
You do this.
We do this, right, to ensure that everybody knows when Election Day is. But really, turnout is driven by candidates. And that's what people who aren't in the profession don't realize. Yeah. It's driven by candidates. The highest in recent history, if you consider 1996 recent history, the highest turnout we had for a presidential race was 56%. And that's not good enough, but it is what it is. And that's because Clinton was on the ballot then, and people were eager and people were excited. When people are excited as to what's on the ballot, when they want change, when they want to really their voice to be magnified and heard, they participate, they come out and vote. When they look at the ballot and go, or they look at the candidates and go, then the turnout reflects,
Yeah, I think that is a storied account of what we know already, which is unfortunate. To an unregistered voter, how can they become involved in the process? Can they vote on Election Day, up until Election Day?
Absolutely. They can register to vote at any one of our satellite locations that are open Monday through Friday, at this point, Monday through Sunday, from 9 to 4. They can also come in on Election Day. If they find themselves unregistered on the Election Day, they can go to any satellite and say, I want to register and vote today, and they will be able to do that. We have same-day registration in the state of Michigan.
Absolutely. And people can find out more information on what's on the ballot by going to...
They can look at their Election Connection newsletter that came to the mail, to the home. I know millennials rather go online, and that's okay, too. They can go to detroitmi.gov/elections.
Let me check my mailbox online. Detroit City Clerk Janice Winfrey, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And you can find out more about this very interview and on how to vote and become a part of the democratic process and much more at MichiganChronicle.com. I'm digital anchor Andre Ash.